Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast, hosted by Jake Bolden and presented by the Conseco Group General Contracting and Mighty Dog Roofing. Don't miss another Tuesday episode by subscribing to the podcast on all streaming platforms or catch our visual presentation uploaded every week on YouTube. Don't miss our next ticket giveaways by subscribing and following on all Blue Raider Podcast social media accounts on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Blue Raider Pod. Welcome back to another episode of the Blue Raider Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Bolden, and in today's episode, we're going to be recapping another exciting week in hoops action with your favorite voice of the Blue Raiders, Chip Walters, talking all things hoops. We'll even reflect a little bit on football on the back end of today's episode after last week's interview with head coach Derek Mason. And then in between the hoops and football talk, joining us will be Lady Raiders basketball star, potential player of the year, ? Tamia Scott will be joining the episode once again as she returns from the summer series. So exciting to talk with her and all the success that the Lady Raiders are doing this year. And again, thanks to you for tuning into today's episode. I know this isn't our typical release date, so thanks for staying tuned on our social media platforms so you didn't miss that announcement. And of course, if you aren't already, do so on our Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of the above. You can make sure you don't miss out on any of those future announcements. And also, if you're listening to us on YouTube, take the time to go ahead and hit that subscriber button. We're getting closer and closer to that 100 mark, and I would appreciate it greatly. But before we bring in Chip Walters, I want to take just a second to thank our sponsors of today's episode, beginning with the Conseco Group. Since 1997, the Conseco Group has been turning dreams into reality. Whether it's pre-construction consulting, construction management, design, build, or renovations and improvements, we're here to exceed your expectations. At Conseco Group, we don't just deliver, we deliver with passion, precision, and unparalleled quality. Our hands-on approach ensures your investment is maximized and your vision is brought to life. From Clarksville down to Columbia and beyond, trust the Conseco Group to handle every detail with expertise and care. If you're ready to build your future, contact the Conseco Group today at 615-298-9907 or visit their website at consecogroup.com. That's CONSECO group.com. And thank you to Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East. When it comes to your home, trust Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East for all of your needs. As a veteran and locally owned business, we're honored to be one of just 11 Owens Corning contractors nationwide to win their prestigious service award. From roofing and gutters to windows and siding, our expert team delivers top-quality craftsmanship and unmatched service. We're here to protect your home with pride and precision. Choose Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East, where excellence is a tradition. Call them today at 615-MD-ROOFS, that's ROOFS, or visit their website at mightydog.roofing.com to schedule your free quote today. Again, thank you to the Conseco Group and Mighty Dog Roofing Nashville East for sponsoring today's episode. Now, as I preface at the beginning, returning to us here at the Blue Raider Podcast is voice of the Blue Raiders. It is Chip Walters. Chip, how's it going?
Doing good. Had a, it's always good when you're coming off of a win, and as this will air, we will already be out in Las Cruces. Our travel was changed a little bit this week. Coach McDevitt wanted to get out of town. Especially when you go to the Mountain Time Zone, it's a little different. So we left on Tuesday afternoon, and so they'll have practice Wednesday, and then, of course, a game day practice on Thursday before playing the game at the Pan American Center. So kind of in two places at one time, I guess.
As a man that's done that trip a number of times now since New Mexico State has entered into Conference USA, tell me a little bit about this trip. You already talked about the quarries of not only going to Mountain Time, but this is also the highest elevation they're faced by a very large margin. I'm sure that adds a little bit to it. And then, like you touched on, getting there early, maybe, I don't know if that's a part of the acclimation process that McDevitt likes to have, but what is that road trip like? There's a lot of history in both of those arenas that just, they create such a good home atmosphere that's tough to play in.
It is. I mean, they're they are in cities that are, they're the only show in town in Las Cruces and in El Paso. And, I hear people talk about, it's such a long trip or whatever. You have an hour and a half flight to Dallas, and then it's about another hour and a half after you change planes. To me, and this is just me personally, it's one of my favorite trips in the league because of what you mentioned, because both places do have a great atmosphere. I've over time have built some friendships in, both of those towns with their radio guys and other folks that have become friends, and plus it is such a different uh, area of the country than what we're used to. I mean, you go out there and you're basically in the desert for a few days, and the Pan American Center. It all started with what Lou Henson did on two occasions as their head coach, and of course, when you get to El Paso uh, at the Don Haskins Center, the building, the address of the building is whatever the number is, Glory Road, which harkens back to the movie and the 1966 Miners of Texas Western.
Yeah, so much history there on the West Coast swing and a lot of action. But before we kind of dive into what to expect with the Raiders, I want to take a quickly to recap this last weekend. The Raiders do split Thursday. They lose at home to La Tech 85-74. Sean Newman Jr. has what I would describe as the game of his life with 23 points, a guy that averages 10 a night. Another little note, too, he had 11 free throws. I believe he was perfect. And going into that game, I had written on the boards that the man he got to beat is Daniel Bacho, and a guy that in his career against MTSU played him 4 times, has averaged over 20 points in those games. I believe he had a double-double in 3 of those 4. The one time he didn't was in last year's first-round matchup of the Conference USA tournament. Obviously, that was a recipe of success. And then Thursday night, you hold him to 10 points and 1 rebound. And if you told me going into that matchup that Bacho's going to have 10 points, 1 rebound, I think, oh, great. We're gonna run away with this one, and that just wasn't the case. And really, it was that second half, because the first half had a lot of shadows of Bowling Green last Saturday. Right, every punch that La Tech threw, we had a counter punch, and it showed there. Getting late in that half, we had overcome 2 pretty substantial deficits, but they had a counter punch right out the gate of the second half, and there was no escaping it. Really, the 11-point margin doesn't even really show that for the majority of that half, we were down 15-16, and really frustrating as a fan, certainly, because you're coming off the high of Bowling Green. But, I'll turn it to you. What did we see that second half? Where did we go wrong?
Well, what we saw was the team that was predicted to win the conference championship this year in the preseason, and we saw a team that has Sean Newman, who is the number 1 or 2 assist guy in the country, who decided to take on a scoring role the other night. And also, Daniel Bacho is just going to draw attention, and he is the number 3 field goal percentage player in the country at almost 70% or something like that. But it was a battle with him a year ago, and I look back, Jake, and think about going back into the Sun Belt days and everything, of all the schools that we've had to face year in, year out through these 2 leagues, the Sun Belt and Conference USA. The one that has been the thorn in the side of the Raiders, probably more than any, is Louisiana Tech. They played 2 games back in the 80s when Bruce Stewart was here, but then obviously became regular opponents once the Sun Belt days have been here, and they as of now, they have a 17-8 lead overall in the series, and have won 6 of 11 games played in Murfreesboro. So it's for whatever reason, it has been a tough matchup for years. And did Middle have a bit of a hangover after the Western game? Maybe. But they're really good to start with, and I you would love to have played better, but everybody in this league, as we have seen night in and night out, has the opportunity to beat everybody else. And Middle's gone on the road and won a lot of games this year, as much as anybody in the league, and they're facing that task this week. But had a nice bounce back on Saturday. But Louisiana Tech is just they have a collection of athletes year in and year out that you go back to Eric Kunkel when he was head coach, and even prior to that, they have almost always kind of played the same style, and they don't call themselves the Dunkin' Dogs for nothing. It kind of reminds me of Murray State. Murray can change coaches, can change players. They play the same way and have done so for a long time, and that's a credit to what they've built in Ruston over the years. And they're starting to peak at the right time. Jacksonville State might be tailing off a little bit, and I know our coaching staff here is trying to make sure that they, to steal a phrase from Kermit Davis, they're trying to get the team right at the right time of the year.
I'm glad you bring up, the part there about Jack State included, and and people will call me an apologist, and maybe rightfully so. But let me, before we get into the Sam Houston State game, just to talk about the lay of the land here that is Conference USA with La Tech in particular. Obviously, that loss on Thursday is disappointing. I think everyone would agree. Nick McDevitt would say that was disappointing. The players would say that was disappointing. So I don't want to sit here and say that. Should they have won? Maybe so. When you look at La Tech's record, probably they should have won. But here's the reality, and you said it there at the beginning. They are preseason favorites, and that wasn't on accident. They didn't have any injuries. This is still the same team that fielded from all the way back in October that got that preseason favorite to here. That was a team that, again, could win when we get to Huntsville in March. And I will make that same argument as we saw on Saturday with Sam Houston, that any team in this conference could potentially win it. And when I dive into this stuff, and I asked Coach McDevitt in our press conference on Saturday about, the 3-point shooting, and we saw an example of that with Sam Houston about how they were able to catch fire Lamar Wilkerson. But this conference, top to bottom, it could be anyone, any given night. And we saw a great example of that when La Tech returned to Bowling Green on Saturday. Western, after getting their butts handed to them by MTSU and Sam Houston on Thursday, they pull a win in an improbable situation, staring down the barrel of a 5-game losing streak, and beat Louisiana Tech. And it just epitomizes how much this conference has parity. And any given night, you can't go to sleep. And even to bring up what's coming up this weekend with New Mexico State, a team who is 5-2 on the road this year, but it's 3-4 at home. And that's not really an indictment on them and their home play. It's an indictment on you. You've got to be ready to play, because even a team like New Mexico State, who is offensively handicapped, in my opinion, still finds ways to win on the road at the number one team in the conference every time they've been there. You've got Jack State. They just find a way. So let's dig into that Sam Houston game, 74-70. The one thing that really stood out to me was the 16 offensive rebounds. That wasn't the highest of the year, but it was up there certainly, and that was every bit of the reason that we were able to stay into that basketball game, despite allowing Sam Houston to shoot 10 of 23 from three. It's the third highest 3-point field goal percentage we allowed this year. Trey Green, a guy that has just kind of, I call him the designated hitter. He's a guy that will sit on the bench, call him on at the last second. He comes in and just hits a home run. And we needed every bit of those 5 home runs, those 3-pointers that he hit, 17 points to lead the team. We needed every bit of it. And again, back to what we're talking about this conference, you just can't take any night for granted. You split the week. It is what it is. A win's a win. You're still in third place. But great showing by Trey. Big congratulations to Esau, 1,500 points. Big congratulations to Cam Weston, 1,000. So much to really, again, You pulled yourself up from your bootstraps. This week could have been a disaster. You were able to settle a hot shooting Lamar Wilkerson, and again, you come out 1-1, no harm, no foul. You're still in third.
Yeah, and it's interesting whether you after the loss on Thursday and the win on Saturday, Middle ended up exactly where they were going into that night with the conference standings. We talked about how Louisiana Tech had been picked to win the league. Well, also, we have to have a little bit longer memory too. Sam Houston won the regular season championship last year, and Lamar Wilkerson was one of the guys who got them there. They were picked third in the preseason, as a matter of fact, just ahead of Middle, and they had won one game in the league until the previous weekend, and all of a sudden they caught fire, just like Louisiana Tech had lost 2 games at home the weekend before, and they were playing in desperation mode on Thursday night here. And you had Sam Houston, who had gone to Western and won by 16. They were playing with a great deal of confidence. And, I asked Coach McDevitt after the game, you know, not after we'd gone off the radio. I said, "How far out do you legitimately expect your guys to guard Lamar Wilkerson?" Because he at one point he was 5 for 5 from three and ended up 5 out of 6, and two of those five I called 30 feet and or close to it. And, you know, I think sometimes when a guy decides he's going to shoot it out there, you know, good luck, you know, almost, because you don't want to warp your entire defensive effort when a guy's going to shoot a 30-footer 25 to 30 feet out. But, you know, that was just an example on Saturday of how good this league is. And you're starting to see the national pundits pick up on some of this and start to talk about it, in particular on Twitter. And then when you look at the net rankings, Conference USA still the 9th ranked league in the country out of 32 or 33 conferences. And that is up substantially from a year ago. And it's not that the top is any better, it's that the bottom is way better. And you know, when you talk about getting to Huntsville and teams having everybody having an opportunity to win, I think you've got a legit 6, 7, you know, maybe even 9 that could win the whole tournament. I just don't think FIU, while I think they're good enough on any given night to knock somebody out, I'm not sure they have the firepower to win 4 straight that they would have to do. But it's going to be, I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath down in Huntsville when this thing gets underway, and defenses are probably going to take over. Guards, as we've seen, everybody's got good guards, and Kennesaw is going to be scary to have to play with those 2 shooters. It's you know, over the next 4 games, you know, Nick would never tell you, hey, let's go get a split on the road. You try to win, you try to gear up, win that Thursday game, and then you try to get greedy, and then and take care of things at home, because you'd be gearing up for a big you know, game a week from Thursday at home against Liberty. But you want to do the things you need to do ahead of time to make sure that's a huge game in the standings coming up on the penultimate game of the season.
Absolutely. And to take it even a step further, again, this episode is released on Wednesday, and at the time of recording, and really for the last couple of weeks, Joe Lunardi has had the Conference USA favorite as a 12 seed. And I just couldn't help but think that poor 5 seed that's going to get matched up with the Conference USA winner, because whether that is all the way down to the 9 seed at Sam Houston, or that is the top seed, whether that's Jack State, Liberty, or ourselves, that's a matchup nightmare, just because you're looking at a 12 seed, and obviously that's the very, I think it's 50%. Those games are 50-50 in the NCAA tournament, and Conference USA has certainly inserted themselves into a real first weekend upset potential because of how deep this conference is throughout. But you talked about setting yourself up to make that Liberty game matter. This weekend is important. This is kind of a swing that we've all talked about, because UTEP has really, I don't want to say reinvented the wheel. They've done the thing that they've always done, and that's play excellent defense, but they have brought a scoring edge to them that they really lacked the last couple of seasons. And then New Mexico State, who really has been, you know, the surprise of the league outside of maybe Sam Houston being the 9 seed, but they've been the surprise of the league. I've talked about how good they are on the road, but not necessarily at home. That's a team you really owe one to, because they came here without Mustafa. They're not offensively talented. They are the lowest scoring offense in Conference USA. So you've got to find a way to, in my opinion, kind of reinsert yourself back into the discussion for the number 1 seed by winning that Thursday game. That is the upset night in Conference USA. I think that's the bigger one, and I think it's your better opportunity, in my opinion, just because I think Joe Golding and what he does with that minor defense at home is just a tough place to play. So if you had to circle one that is the likely of the two, I think Las Cruces on Thursday is the better opportunity. But to break down this New Mexico State game, I've got to think with Mustafa back in, it's going to be a different outlook. I hope we don't leave that gym only scoring 57 points again.
You know, I don't think that'll be the case. You know, that was the coming out party last year for Trey Green. If you remember, he had 6 threes in a game where, you know, a middle team that was sputtering nearly came out of there with a win last year, and I know that this team, felt like they let one get away when Esom. It seemed to me it was a night where everybody was kind of looking over their shoulder. Okay, is Esom going to come in or not? And he had just kind of hyperextended his knee down at Louisiana Tech, and needed that day to get better. He is a guy that really takes on challenges. I'll tell you a funny story about him in a minute, but when he likes to be challenged, he likes to uh, have things put out there in front of him. I told him yesterday or on Saturday, he was out there getting loose, and I said, "Hey, Warren Kidd's in the building. He was our original 1,000 rebound guy." And Esom grinned at me. He said, "Did you tell him I'm here too?" And like Warren was going to come out and play that day, but Esom is a guy who has he's a very proud young man, and I think that he felt like, and this is just me talking, I think he felt like he let his guys down by not being available that night against New Mexico State. So I think he's gonna, I think you'll see a big night out of him going into Las Cruces on Thursday night. And one of the other things you talked about, Thursday being the upset night, think about it. Which game of the week do you have more prep time for? And that's the Thursday night game. You basically have 3 practices to get ready, not including your game day practice. You have 3 real practices to get ready for that Thursday game, where you have 1 real practice that's not very physical on Friday, and then a game day practice on a Saturday morning. Chances are, and so your guy. That's one of the things that's paid off for Middle this year, is having an older team that's mature, that will soak in a scout, and whether it be walking through in an arena or in a hotel ballroom, this team has been able to focus and put itself in a good position right now.
To go back on that Esom topic, I do remember that Saturday after when we played UTEP, he was in the post-game presser with us, had a double-double like he does just about every night, it seems, and did make it personal, like that. He felt like, as you said, he did feel like he let his team down. He said that I'll make sure that never happens again. And it is a character moment for Esom and what it means to this guy, not only to be a teammate, but to win. And I think, again, I expect big things from him Thursday. I don't know that he has nothing to prove to you and I, but I think he has a lot to prove to himself about what's coming up with him in Las Cruces. I think he owes Filipovic, a guy who had a heck of a game here, that I think, again, in his mind, he didn't face Esom.
Yeah, and he also knows this is his last ride in college basketball, and that he knows he's on a good team, and he's on a team that can do some things, and I think he wants to kind of lead this group emotionally, and also be a leader on the floor and squeeze every ounce out of what is in this ball club.
Absolutely. And let's move on to that UTEP game on Saturday. You beat the Miners at home 71-68. If those that can think back just a few weeks ago, that was the 11 of 24 free throw shooting night. Again, the score, it was close. We did everything we could, it seemed, to keep El Paso in that game because we refused to put it on ice with the free throws. I believe it was 6 of the last 7 or 7 of the last 8 free throws that they had missed. I know it was 3 straight front end of 1-and-1s. They just refused to do it. But you feel better knowing that if that number improves slightly, but you can't put apples to apples just because the play style is so different with this Miner team. They can get in rock fights and they can win games in the 60s, but again, to a testament to how much this team has improved on the offensive end. In that game in Murphy Center, they had 5 players in double digits. Corey Camper Jr. was a guy that I'm really impressed with. He's a high-flying athlete coming off of an ankle injury. When he came into that swing in Bowling Green and Murfreesboro, that I looked to, again, maybe take a step forward from what we saw a couple weeks ago. But the Miners are on a 3-game losing streak. They are just as desperate as is everyone that's in that 4 to 8 spot right now, because going into this last week, UTEP was right on, I think, a half game behind the Raiders. And now dropping these two on the road this last week at Jacksonville State and Kennesaw State, they're really, much like La Tech was this last week, they're very desperate. They understand that if they want to maintain a position in those top four spots, and maybe even, I think there are scenarios that they could find themselves back up there at the two. I could be wrong, but there still is vying for those ideal matchups. And again, to go back on Conference USA, I don't know that there is an ideal matchup. I think you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, because I don't know that there's a team that I prefer to play, maybe FIU, but I don't know that there's a team that I prefer to play in this tournament. Every night's going to feel like a championship. But to El Paso and to this game that's coming up, it's going to be a bloodbath. I anticipate it, and I envy you being there in El Paso, because that's going to be one heck of an atmosphere.
Yeah. In particular, because that city, there's 3 million people out there when you include Juarez across the border in Mexico. But and when the Miners are good, they packed that place. They had 12,000 in there for New Mexico State, and laid a gigantic ostrich egg that night. Lost by 30 at home to New Mexico State. So, what is it going to be like on, Western Kentucky, I think, is going to be the one who really catches them in a desperation mode on Thursday. But for Middle, it's a pretty simple thing with them, and that is take care of the basketball. And Middle has been really good in the last couple of weeks, even in the loss at home, of taking care of the basketball, because UTEP is one of the top turnover teams. They force you into turnovers in the entire country. They're number one in the league, and they have been in the top 5 in the country most of the year. So, when that is number 1, 2, and 3 when it comes to bullet points. Take care of the ball, take care of the ball, take care of the ball. And once you get them into a half court situation, then you hopefully you run your offense. And Middle has been at its best when they can play an up tempo game. I think they would like to be able to do that before UTEP gets an opportunity to get set up and locked into what they're doing, and try to if the availability comes, score in the first 6 to 8 seconds of a possession.
A lot of that comes too on the defensive rebounding perspective. When UTEP misses, make them one and done trips, that allows you to get in that transition. I know we like to push that pace, and yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the pace of play is what can throw UTEP out of whack there. So I look forward to that one. Much like a lot of Conference USA, every single night seems to throw a wrench into the plans of the postseason. So we're getting closer and closer to the end, much like the Lady Raiders are. We'll go ahead and transition to Lady Raiders. They get a good sweep on the road this last week. It doesn't seem like much, but Louisiana Tech, a team that always seems to give the Lady Raiders trouble on the road. Paris Bradley had 20 points here in Murfreesboro, but much like the Jalen Gregory assignment, that is, if you're going to lead us in scoring, you're going to be guarded by Jalen Gregory the next game. And sure enough, she did. Held the potential freshman of the year candidate to 6 points. Boulder Rava 16 and 11. Savannah Davis has herself a career night with 4 made 3-point field goals. I think, again, I don't want to say coming out party. We've seen flashes of her game, and we know what she can do. She is the single game Tennessee high school 3-point record holder for a reason. But she has really stepped into a role on the defensive end, kind of taking pride in that. And then on Saturday, the score 59-46 against Sam Houston, a team that has really turned their season around here in February. I think they're up to 5 wins in Conference USA after starting it out. I think one win in the first seven conference games. So Scott gets back into her ways, 20 points, 8 of 12 shooting, her 11th time of scoring 20 plus, and Boulder Rava a 19 and 14 performance. Altogether, it's a business trip. They took care of business. La Tech is always one that is scary because of the trouble. Went to overtime last year. You're just happy that they're coming back unscathed, and they still have the potential to move closer and closer to clinching that regular season title with another sweep of a home series this week.
Well, and, they're on a collision course with a game at Liberty next week, and you feel like they'll come home and play well against New Mexico State and UTEP. Coach Ensel's always really good about giving them a reason night in, night out, and And with New Mexico State coming in on Thursday night, they've got a player who, outside of Tamia Scott and Anastasia Boldreva, is probably the only other candidate for Player of the Year in the league, and that's Kaiser, who scored 19 in the first game against Middle. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of defensive effort Middle has against her. I think with having two legit candidates for Player of the Year, and to try to shut her down, and we'll see what the coaches Insel come up with for a defensive plan there. But you don't want to lose focus. But again, fans can look ahead and say, okay, they will have an opportunity to clinch the outright championship. If they take care of business at home, they can clinch the championship on Liberty's floor next Thursday night. So I know that's a carrot that's out there, but you fans can worry about that, but players can't.
Right. And I know how big of a deal that is. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that makes that opportunity of winning the regular season title on Liberty's floor really just a juicy story in and of itself. But you're right. You can't take this week for granted for all the reasons you listed. Molly Kaiser, a top 10 scorer in women's college basketball this year. I do think that you let her do what she does. She's very, as we just saw this last weekend with Lamar Wilkerson, or if you're familiar with Jaron Pierre out at Jacksonville State, she can just do it all. She was the biggest surprise in this conference as far as returners. I thought for certain that she was going to go to a P4 somewhere, but she stayed at New Mexico State, and she's kind of been a big part of them. New Mexico State does have upset potential. They do have the lone win against Liberty outside of the Lady Raiders. They've given every other team in this conference fits on a night in, night out, including the Lady Raiders. We did go to overtime there in Las Cruces. So, again, that's not a game you can take for granted. And then UTEP, although they are at the bottom of the conference, UTEP in years past has given us trouble. This is not the same UTEP team, but I am very happy the New Mexico State game, because of the ability to prepare for it, is on a Thursday versus that Saturday. You can't overlook Molly Kaiser until that Liberty game of next Thursday night. So there's so much really to that this week. Although you can look past, there's work to be done this week. And as I look at some takeaways from this last week, I want to really pinpoint these and harp on these. Something about this team that has been impressive, and maybe we take for granted as Lady Raider fans, and we're so accustomed to seeing this defense powerhouse that is Rick Insel, something that he has really stressed on this year. This last weekend was 14 and 15th time this season a team has scored less than 50 points, which is the most in a single season since Rick Insel has been here. And for the last 5 games, they've done that, and they're currently at 52.8 points per game, which is 6th best in college basketball. Again, barring, I know Sunday's a big women's basketball day, but you're still a top 10 scoring defense in the country. You're only 2 points off the lead as we sit right now. So something about this team is so impressive, and I know at times I've always been upset with maybe the offense, but when a team can barely eclipse 50 points, that means you got to get to 51. And this team really has no problem doing that, even though at times they've had their issues and they've had challenges. Getting to 51, it's a done deal. This team is just so dominant on the defensive end, and it's really been something to behold.
Well, it has, in the development of Anastasia Boldreva being a true rim protector, has helped that as far as points in the paint. And then you've got a lockdown defender like Jalen Gregory, Savannah Davis coming along, and Tamia Scott, who, just has all the tools that you could hope for on both ends of the floor. Her athletic ability, her basketball IQ, there's just, it's like, they've got that kind of force field around that 3-point line, and they make it very difficult for teams to score. I mean, you've had, the first game at Western this year, Western found a little something there and took advantage of it, but Middle was able to turn that back around and get that victory. But, right now it's a 3-team horse race. Middle, Liberty, and Western Kentucky seem to be separating themselves from the field in Conference USA. And while the men's side has been really good top to bottom, it has been top heavy a little bit this year. Not to mean that on any given night something could happen, and we've seen it, but right now, you've got three teams. I think if you ask people in their heart of hearts that study the women's game, there are really basically three teams that will go into Huntsville with a chance to win the championship, and Middle would be the prohibitive favorite.
And let's be clear, too, there's a lot at stake, not only getting, I'll say, to the top 2 seed, because that does provide an extra day of rest when you get to Huntsville. You play
Yes.
on, I believe it's the Tuesday, you sit the Wednesday if you win, and then you play
No,
the Thursday.
you play Tuesday and you sit, or you play Wednesday,
Wednesday,
and then you don't play again till Friday
Friday. That's
if you
right.
win.
So
So yeah.
there's a lot at stake, not only from that perspective, but you talk about this being a 3-horse race. There's a lot at stake for finishing in that one spot. I don't think that this team is scared to play anybody, but you do like the opportunity to get the path of least resistance to the championship is the 1 seed, because if you're the 1, your Liberty and Western would effectively be on the bottom half of the bracket. And then they have to beat each other up on that Friday to then, potentially, again, barring you winning, get
Yeah,
into a championship.
if you can get that 1 seed, you're only going to have to face one of those two along the way.
Right. And then again, where I sit now with the 4 or 5, I believe I have to do some digging, but I believe right now it's projected that it's New Mexico State, Louisiana Tech. Again, matchups that you feel pretty comfortable with because of your defensive capabilities, not to mention the 8-9 matchup you play in the first round. So again, I hate looking too far ahead, but a lot hinges on finishing in that 1 spot. So one thing I want to, before we switch over to this Tamia Scott interview, this is the last homestand for the Lady Raiders, Thursday night, 6:30 against New Mexico State. But really, it's Saturday, the 1:00 tip-off at Murphy Center. It is senior day. We're going to be honoring Bouldereva along with Gregory. Jada Granum, I believe, is also going to be partaking in the senior day festivities. So again, I can't encourage fans that are listening enough to be there, because these ladies have done so much for this program over the last 4 years. I know Matt has put some stats out over on Twitter. This is the winningest 4-year run in Coach Insel's history, and these girls, especially whether it's been on the floor or on practice days, Jada has been an integral part of that as well. I don't want to take anything she's done for this program for granted, so much that I think that you fans need to be there Saturday to honor these girls for what they've done for this team.
Couldn't say it any better. I mean, this is a group that lost a couple of superstars from a year ago, and they've bounced right back and put themselves in exactly the same position they were this time a year ago.
And we'll take a break here, and we'll be right back after this Tamia Scott interview to talk a little football. The BRP is proudly partnered with Rivals Network affiliate GoMiddle.com. Subscribe for premium content for all the inside scoop on MTSU athletics, recruiting, or join our free forums to discuss today's episode and all things Blue Raiders. The BRP is also partnered with the College Huddle, a nationwide collaborative effort with over 80 Division I programs represented. Check out the website at thecollegehuddle.com to catch up on all college football content with daily articles and episodes provided by the largest college podcast community on the internet. Joining the Blue Raider podcast once again, it is junior shooting guard Tamia Scott. Tamia, how's it going?
It's going good.
Tamia, interesting here. Now that we have 2 podcast hosts sitting side by side, I know something you're kind of diving into a little bit. Tell me a little bit about that experience there on the Glass Hoops podcast.
Yeah, it was unexpected, but I've actually enjoyed it, and I mean, I'm better than I thought I would be at it. It's been fun just to, kind of talk to my teammates in a different way than I usually do, and just get to know them a little bit more.
Tell me about the learning curve there. It does, I like sports, so I thought doing a podcast would be a fun way to kind of talk about. Obviously, you're doing it in a different light, as you say, talking with your teammates. You learn a little bit about yourself, how you talk to people, how you ask questions, and those kind of things. So, has there been much of a learning curve for you doing the podcasting thing?
I mean, not so much. I just have to kind of learn how to bring up stuff when it's just completely different, just kind of changing subjects and in that matter. But other than that, no, not really.
I can imagine it is a little difficult because you know all these girls outside of a podcast window. So how do you carry on new conversations that are, enticing to other people? Yeah, I can imagine that's a unique way of looking at it. But to me, one thing too, I know when I had you over the summer, we talked a little bit about you and your background, the art degree, still working hard on that. I know you had that 6-hour a week class over the summer. How is school going? Are we still able to handle it with the busy schedule of basketball?
Yes, we are. I'm really accommodated too in the art department, so that's an underrated blessing for sure. They just work around our schedule, my schedule, practice, but it's not too much right now. I'm handling it pretty well. It's just the same thing I said before, like the hands-on stuff is just harder to do because we're on the road so much. And the work, it's a lot more. It's just a different level this year, honestly. I mean, that's just how it is with design and art. It's just a new level every year. So, but I'm upholding pretty well.
One thing you talked about too is I'm sure as you get into junior, senior level of classes, it starts to get a little bit more fine tuned. Are you still finding yourself moving towards the graphic designs, like Photoshop, Illustrator? Those are kind of some of your interests we talked about last time.
Yeah, I'm just like learning those programs a lot more now, digging deeper into just everything that I can do with them. And just kind of exploring like where I can take, this degree because there's so much I can do with it. So I'm just kind of learning to just personalize things more towards where I'm headed.
Absolutely. Well, Tamia, let's talk a little basketball. I know that's what all the fans are tuning in to listen to. You guys had a great week this last weekend. You're really going down this final home stretch of 4 games. Tell me a little bit, where's your head at right now? I know you guys had an unwanted loss there in Bowling Green, but you guys have really turned for the better. The defense, this is one of the best defenses I've ever seen in this gym. It's a lot to behold. But tell me, where's your head at with these final 2 weeks of games?
I mean, I think coach said it best in practice today. Championships are won, and this last stretch of the season, we just have to be our best selves from here on out. We can't really have slip ups, and if we do, we just have to cover them up with just hard work and more effort. And that's pretty much where my head's at, honestly. Just making sure that we're better every single day, because we know that especially at this point in the season, people are going to give us their best shot as they've been doing, but everybody's just kind of at that point where you have to. So we just have to play really hard and just continue to get better individually to be better as a whole.
Now, you talked about this team being at their best. Have we seen that version yet? Do you think that this team we've seen the best this team has to offer? Or are you guys still kind of peeking towards that moment?
I think we've showed it in a quarter. I think we've showed it in a few minutes in a game, and maybe a half of a game, but not the full 40 minutes. And we definitely need to find that, and it's possible. And I think that we're headed, especially the start to this week has been really good. And I feel like a lot of my teammates' head mindsets are like in the same place. So it's definitely possible to show up, to get those whole 40 minutes that I'm talking about.
I want to circle back to my comment about the defense. For the 15th time this season, this last Saturday, it was the 15th time you guys have held a team under 50 points, which is the most ever in Rick Insel's era there. What about this team defensively, it makes it so tough to score on?
We are just really, really into our principles. We preach our principles every single day. And if you mess up, like they tell you, you can't just mess up and nothing happens because there's always consequences. And defense is a really, really big part to our game, just keeping our, competitors under a certain amount of points because we're playing for something a lot bigger. So we have to make sure that, some of that stuff will help us in the net rankings and just further on down the season.
Tell me, too, about your connection with some of these new girls. I know Savannah Davis is someone that's gotten more playing time this year, something that Coach Insel had really talked about. The defensive effort was what was going to see her more time on the floor or earn her more time on the floor. How does that message come across to some of these new athletes? Because much like yourself coming out of high school, you were a very offensive backed player, 2,000 career point scorer. We knew what you had there, but defense is something that is, like as you said, it's the principles of what coach instills in his players. How does that message get translated quickly? And, how quickly are these girls expected to pick up on these defensive principles?
I honestly think actions speak a lot more than words in this matter, because Savannah, we all know what she can do on offense, but she still wasn't getting in the game until she got her defense to a certain level. And once she did, she's been really big for our team in these past couple games. And I feel like our younger girls are seeing that, and they're seeing, hey, she's gotten better. So that means, like, it's just spoken for, honestly. It's just a really big part. You have to do it. And once you do it, you're rewarded.
Well, let's talk about you now. When you were on the show in the summer, I challenged you to kind of put yourself. What are your expectations for yourself? And you were coming off 12 points per game. You were the fourth leading scorer. Well, this year, from a sophomore to junior year jump, you lead the team in scoring. I myself owe you an apology. And I was doing my preseason roster breakdown. We talk about Jalen, we talk about Anastasia, but for good reason. This roster, it's easy to get lost, but you've the cream has risen to the top with yourself. Very impressed with your play this year. Tell me, for you, what has changed this year? What has taken you from that 12 point per game to 16 second in Conference USA?
It's me versus me, and I've really just hit on that this season with myself, because I know what I can be and I know what I can do. And a lot of times I was just kind of stopping myself, whether it was like mindset or not enough confidence, or just not getting in the gym enough. So I've just really taken pride in doing those things and getting my IQ up, watching a lot more basketball, and all those things just make me better. And like I was saying earlier about just individually getting better for like the team as a whole, I've just really done that in these last few months, and it's worked out for me.
Is there any player in particular, teammate, maybe a coach? I know Matt, you and Matt have a good relationship. What really pushes you? It gives you that motivation game to game. What is your why, as some people may ask?
Honestly, my potential, just knowing how good I can be, and how great it can get for me. And honestly, that's my biggest motivation, is just knowing there's so much more for me, and I'm not just like at my peak. There's just so much more. So it's like, why not find that? Why not work for that? And, my teammates are just really encouraging. They're just always, telling me what they see in me. And sometimes I'll kind of get down on myself and I won't see it so much, and they'll just remind me. Same with my coaches. They're motivating.
You're playing a lot of these teams for the second time this season. Again, last year you might have gotten lost in the shuffle, being the fourth leading scorer. This year, that you've got to be top of the scouting report along with Boulder Ava. Tell me, are you experiencing a little bit more heat this season on the defensive side? Even though your scoring would lead me to believe that heat isn't enough, but are you experiencing that heat from these other teams?
I've definitely had some challenges in some games where I wasn't expecting to be guarded as heavily. And sometimes I'll just find myself just standing around kind of, and that's something I definitely need to work on, because I'm the leading scorer and teams are definitely going to scout me. But offense wise, scoring wise, it hasn't really, I don't really see a difference. I feel like I still get the same stuff that I want to get. If I'm not doing good offensively, it's because of me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know the other night, I can't remember which game it was in particular. It was 2 weeks ago. I do remember that when you guys were at home. You talked about how you were unstoppable. You were able to get the shots that you were able to want. You got there. Your teammates set you up well. Obviously, there's a lot of play design to get you open, get you to the rim. A lot of high ball screens from Boulder Ava. Talk about the dynamic of you and Boulder Ava. Someone that I know everyone talks about. She's, as I said, top of the scouting report with her given size. I like to draw the comparison here that there's a potential battle for player of the year between you two, being second and third in the conference in scoring. Is that ever a conversation between you two, or even on a scoring basis, who gets more points?
No, I feel like it's just unspoken. We don't really mind. We're not really too mindful of that. We just both play and we both do like good things. But talking about Nas, she's just she just opens the floor up. She's a really big advantage for drivers like me because people double her, and that leaves shooters open. And it's really good playing with her, honestly. And then on the defensive end, we were talking about this earlier in our hoops podcast. She's just kind of our safe. Like if we get beat, she's at the rim there, and we just help each other a lot on defense and offense.
I'll get ahead of my line of question here because you bring up Nos. She's a senior this year. You've got other seniors on the team, Courtney. You've got Jalen. You also have Jada Granum, who are all going to be honored this Saturday at Senior Day. Tell me about this group in particular, what they all mean to you. You've played multiple years with all four of them. Alina Enrique also, she's the other addition who's new. But tell me about this group. What makes them so special? Currently, you're already the winningest group over 4 year span, 106 games. You still got guaranteed 5 games left. What about this group in particular is so special?
I think it's experience. They have a lot of experience in a lot of different types of games, and just a lot of knowledge on not even basketball in general, but Middle Tennessee, because Jalen, she's been here. Jada, she's been here for 5 years, and then she's spent a lot of time at UTEP, which was still in our conference, so she's still knowledgeable in that matter. I think that's the biggest thing they bring, and I see that when we play, and it's just easy because we all have like chemistry that we've just built over this time. But yeah, biggest thing is just experience that they have.
Absolutely. And again, to the fans that are listening, that is this Saturday at 1 p.m. We're going to be honoring all 5 of those seniors this evening. Again, the winningest winningest 4 year span, 106 games, 2 NCAA tournaments, 1 WNIT Final Four, and they've only experienced 7 conference losses thus far. So again, big accomplishments for them. To me, you've been a big part of that as well. As we go down this final 4 game stretch, you've got New Mexico State, UTEP this week, but a lot of eyes are on that Liberty game next Thursday. I don't want to get you out of the headspace of your business trip this week, but as you eye that conference championship next week and then potentially down in Huntsville, tell me about yourself, this team. What do you need to see from your teammates to really pull through and get these 2 championships coming up in these next 3 weeks?
Well, first of all, just take it game by game. New Mexico, they gave us a lot of trouble last time we played them, and then Liberty, they're a contender for what same thing we are, and they have a lot of the same aspects that we do, I feel like, as a basketball team. So I think we just have to play our ball and not get too into what they're trying to make us do on defense and things like that. Really just play ourselves and just be ourselves. And I feel like that's when we strive the most instead of getting out of whack and just doing uncharacteristic things. Yeah, that we usually do when we just kind of get confuzzled with their defense. Just stay on track is the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Staying on track. The Lady Raiders will be again this week. New Mexico State on Thursday, UTEP on Saturday for Senior Day at 1 o'clock. Tamia, leading the Lady Raiders in scoring this year. Excited to see what you do down the stretch, especially there in Huntsville. Thank you for taking the time. This busy schedule I know you're dealing with, podcast hosting, scoring buckets, taking all these art classes. Thanks again, Tamia, for stopping by.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Did you know the Blue Raider podcast has an online store? You can now support your favorite podcast by checking out our selection at our website, blueraiderpodcast.com. And stay tuned for new merchandise releases as we collaborate with athletes in NIL partnerships.
And we're back with Chip Walters. We're going to be talking a little bit of football now. Luckily, we had Coach Mason take a second with us last week. Amidst his busy spring schedule, he's got all these recruits in. And if you listened to that episode last week, and if you haven't, I will encourage you, if you're listening on YouTube or if wherever you listen to us at, it will be in our most recent episode. Coach Mason, very complimentary of this signing class for a lot of good reasons. And I want to go back to our conversation we had last time you were on here. We were talking football. You made the comment that Mason had signed that class sight unseen. And I think that's the perfect way to put it. I don't know that he would put it that way, but I think that's the perfect way to put it, because the guy that was missing from football for a whole year from a coaching perspective, didn't have any guys on his whiteboard. He has to come in, fill these guys in late. But now this is a whole cycle of recruiting. He loves this high school class. It's very complimentary, but I can't say enough how happy he is, whether it was portrayed well in our interview or not. But I can definitely say when we got off the air, he's very complimentary of the offensive line that he's put together. He has so many options, which is a good thing to have, along with some added weapons there in the backfield. I think there's so much to look forward to, along with the return of Adiato.
Well, exactly, and I think those who've been around, you really want to see Nick Fadiato play with a good offensive line around him, because he is he's a guy who is I saw him over the weekend. He and his family, they were out for basketball, but Nick is such a good guy. You want to see him succeed, and in this, the one thing, when you look at the high school class and as well as the transfer class that they've brought in, I'm no judge of talent, especially when looking at something on film. What I can see is when they list the heights and weights, the middle has gotten bigger across the board, whether it is linemen, whether it is defensive secondary, whether it's linebackers. They have gone for size in their recruiting class, and I know one of them I'm really excited to see is Otto Van Rensburg, who out of East Tennessee, who I had in he's out of Alcoa, I think. Isn't that correct?
Sevier County.
Sevier County. I had him in the 5A championship game down at the Blue Cross Bowl, and his Sevier County team steamrolled Page. So and they did it with a good offensive line. It gave a quarterback a lot of time, and so the things that I saw out of him, really excited about. They've bolstered the running back room. They have bolstered the quarterback room, and the size that they have pulled in the secondary. It's not the 5'10", 185 guys. I mean, they're getting corners who are 6'3", 6'4", which you have to have in this era and this style of the way the college game is played.
To cycle back to the Vadiato conversation, and I know his beginning years here was at the tail end when Brent Stock still was here. Can you find anyone that just epitomizes a high character player? Like, he's just a guy that you root for him, not just because he's a good football player, because he is, but he's just such a great kid for so many reasons. And I hope now that he's coming back for this fifth year, again, you just think that this is a line that's we're going to really see. We've seen good Vadiato, and I would even argue that he is the best returning quarterback in Conference USA this year, that we finally see a good piece together season. And I think there's a lot of potential this year with a good offense that he could put up some record numbers.
Well, very well could be. And you're right. There's not there've been some really good kids who've played quarterback here over the years, but Nick is right there with the very best. I think about, I'm fortunate to be in a position where I'm around some of these kids in times when things are good, times when times are not so good, and the thing was, the one thing about Nick that jumps out at me was last November after the FIU game, he stops me after the game. We're getting on the buses, ready to head to the airport. Wanted me to meet his dad, and his brother was there. So, and basically told me right then, he goes, "I can't wait to get back after Christmas break and start getting ready for next year." So he is, he has taken on that leadership role. Even before Coach Mason got here, he had started working into that, and obviously that's going to continue to grow the older you get. and his the players around him, they are better because of him as well, and he has all the leadership qualities you want, and I think we're going to go into a schedule this year that, in my opinion, is probably one of the better balanced schedules we've had in the league in particular, in the way that where games fall, things like that. So I think this team will have a chance for some success this year, and I know that they you want to win them all when you go out there, but this team is coming off of a 3-win season, and I know they want to they want to come out, put on a good show early on, and and going through spring ball will be interesting because the whole makeup of spring practice, and that's another great show for Derek to talk about sometime, is where is his vision of what is going to happen to spring practice, because you hear more and more people talking about spring games are going to go away for a lot of reasons, and expect it to go to more of an NFL model where you have, maybe a couple of different sets of OTAs based around where the transfer portal dates move and all that. It's way more than I want to keep up with, but right now, is the here and now is that spring ball is going to happen, and they're already doing stuff. Matter of fact, Saturday I was walking in the building at about noon, getting ready for the basketball game, and Vadiato's walking out, and I said, "What, did y'all have meetings this morning?" He goes, "No, we had optional lifting." Optional being the word there, and he had made sure he had gotten in there for optional lifting. So, I want them to win for a lot of reasons, and Nick Vadiato is one of them.
I remember in my high school baseball days, our coach would say you have optional workouts, because in preseason in January you couldn't be around coaches. You'd have optional practices, but just do note that if it's optional practice, so is your playing time. So
Right.
Obviously they're in there getting the work in that they need to get done. Spring game is something that's weird, up in the air. I know Mason, when we were off air, kind of touched on the spring game that they did last year, as much fun as that was, and I did enjoy it, and a lot of I know the behind the scenes battling for the homemade steaks is always fun, but they may change things up a little bit this year. I don't know if they've made an official announcement, but something to stay tuned into coming up, because that will be coming up soon, as far as having some sort of family day. You have some insight into this?
Well, not really, but the one thing, that and coaches will talk about this amongst themselves a lot, is that the one thing fans have to remember is they have 15 practices. They have 15 dates for spring ball. If you play a game, that is one less practice, one less skill development session that you have, and basically back that up to the 14th when, well, you've almost got to use that 14th practice to prepare for the spring game. So you ask any coach, they'll tell you that they find more value in having regular practices on those 14th and 15th days. So it'll be interesting to see what they do come up with, whether there is, like you said, some sort of family day or whatever it is. But I think the days of a true spring game are, if not quite a thing of the past yet, it's heading down that track for sure.
I can already see it. People talking about, they brought the spring game back and they're taking it away. But I think the value, as you already touched on, there's way more value in a coach to have these skill development sessions versus having an arbitrary spring game that doesn't matter to really anything necessary. And I think Mason,
because who are you going to play in that game? Who,
right.
Are you going to play Nick Vadiato for 60 minutes? I don't think so. And so are those other three quarterbacks that are in the quarterback room, are they going to get more value out of many more reps in a practice or two practices than they would in a spring game? That's and that's that's one of those things that over the water cooler can be argued all day long.
No, I do think it is the better plan. And I also think the idea of doing, as Mason does a great job as far as marketing to the fans and having a more personal connection with them, doing some sort of family fun day, open practice style thing may be something that I think would still interest the fans, still gain some level of attention to them in the spring. So I look forward to seeing what they come up with in the coming weeks. I'm told that we may hear something soon, but segue back over to the schedule as you talked about. Mason, I know, as I said to him, a lot of meat on that bone. 7 first-year coaches, technically 7 first-year to Division I head coaches. You've got Marshall as the one non-conference, and then you have 6 in-conference first-year head coaches,
Wow.
including Delaware and Missouri State, who has their first season in Division I football. So those aren't first-year head coaches, but it is, as much as we saw with Kennesaw State, it is a new beast. Same with Sam Houston 2 years ago. It is a new beast to come right into FBS football in your first year. So a lot of fresh meat on that bone that I think Mason, again, he feels so excited about this group because, again, of how favorable this schedule is to him. The season kicks off August 30th against Austin Peay. We already know that the rest of the non-conference, Wisconsin, Nevada,
And
I look
Marshall.
forward to hear. And Marshall is the final one at home. I'm glad that Marshall one's at home. I feel, again, favorable that you can even in that non-conference stretch at 3-1. But the conference slate in particular, again, that midweek, I roll my eyes at this midweek schedule. I understand it from a TV contract perspective. I do. I understand why Conference USA needs to do that to pay the bills. And same goes for MTSU because they are the beneficiaries of that midweek TV contracts. But you're not playing 3 games in 15 days. You've got this big long break, which does have its hiccups at times, but I would much rather be playing off of a long break versus turning around 5 days later to play Jacksonville State like you had to do this last year. So,
and the other part about this year's midweek schedule is all 3 midweek games are on Wednesday. It's not like you're playing a Thursday, then a Tuesday, then a Wednesday. So the thing there is you're able to keep your preparation pretty pretty normal throughout that midweek. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Conference USA gave those out to the schools that the midweek games are a viewer bonanza compared to being caught in the clutter of the Saturday TV games. And that it's not as great for tailgating, things like that. But I'll always go back to something when there was talk about what about this as opposed to Maction has they've got the midweek games. I promise you, I would rather play midweek games in Conference USA cities in October than play midweek games in MAC cities in November. So come on out.
oh yeah.
You got 2 home games, 1 road game during those midweek sections. So just come out and make a good time out of it.
Embrace. I'm sure that's the word that Mason would say. And,
Yep.
and again, for good reason. Talk about October around this time around this area. That's nice weather.
Awesome.
Like you can't ask
Yeah.
for better weather. That's trick-or-treating weather, really. So I don't want to get too much into the details here about this schedule we'll wind down. I know I talked to Mark Owens this week. They plan to do their media day there at the end of fall camp, which I'm super excited about because that was a great hit, not only for the Blue Raider podcast, but it was a great media blitz for the players and coaches alike there at the end of fall camp. So I look forward to really breaking down a lot more of that stuff. But I guess, Chip, as we wind down here, kind of gauge your level of excitement. I know I've shared it last week with Brett Walker after talking with Coach Mason. I have my level of expectations very high, but kind of give us a gauge on where your expectations, your excitement for this upcoming year.
I'm not one to put out predictions or whatever, but I think you hear a lot of teams and a lot of coaches talk about improving from game 1 to game 2. I think from year 1 to year 2, or as Derek Mason likes to call it, year 0 to year 1, with in particular when he's talking about a recruiting class. I think again the favorability of the conference schedule, the way that it is, you don't have to fool with Liberty. You're not playing UTEP this year. You do have to go to New Mexico State on the last weekend of the season. You'll have Missouri State at home. You'll go to Delaware. You'll go to Kennesaw. But I think it's a manageable schedule. Wisconsin is its own beast, but outside of that, you look up and down the schedule and you think, okay, there's 11 games that are in play here, and at least from a fan perspective. So that in itself excites me. As old as I am, I'm excited to go to a couple of new stadiums I've never been to before. 3, as a matter of fact. Kennesaw will be one, Delaware will be one, and Nevada will be one. So I can scratch those off the list. And again, with players who are returning, look forward to see their development. How much better is Nick Vattiato going to be? How good is this offensive line going to be that they're putting together? So, and can you put together a run game that is that can be dominant? Again, that all starts with the offensive line. So a lot of things up in the air right now, spinning in my head about the excitement. But, when football season gets here, I'm always excited about it. So, and that'll be no different than in the past.
I think you're going to break some sort of travel record. I'd have to imagine you're going up to Wisconsin. You got New Mexico, Delaware. You're kind of hitting all the bases as far as the climates you can reach this upcoming year.
That'll be 3 different time zones we'll play in this year. But when you throw in a trip to Hawaii or somewhere like that, or you're gonna don't forget New Mexico State. That's going to be a Thanksgiving trip. So that's about a 3-hour flight. The trip to Reno will be 3.5 up there. So the Delaware, I was looking at the map actually on that one when we go there. The Delaware campus is only about 40 minutes from the Philadelphia airport. So for fans who are kind of looking ahead, what would be a good road trip? That won't be an easy in and out, because you can get to Philly, get back from Philly, and again, it's less than an hour drive from the airport. So a lot of stuff going on, and we'll look forward to fall camp just like you are.
And to note on that Delaware trip, you mentioned that, look into it. Also, it's a Wednesday game, so your flight's going to be relatively cheaper versus a Saturday matchup. And also, it's early October or middle October. So
maybe we'll get a Reed Blankenship sighting while we're up in that area. That'll be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Flash that Super Bowl ring. Absolutely. Well, Chip,
That's right.
I appreciate you as always for taking the time to join us, talking hoops, talking football. One last time, before we hang up, I know you got obviously your WGNS stations and your Classic Hit station to plug. But some things I know you do outside of radio. We didn't take the time to really mention them at the end of last episode, but obviously you're a man of many hats, and I want to give you the opportunity to kind of plug some of those.
Well, I mean, our Blue Raider network games for men's basketball are primarily on Totally Hits 93.3 in Nashville, 95.1 in Murfreesboro. WGNS carries as many as they can because they're the primary outlet for women's basketball. But the thing to look ahead here, as soon as basketball is over, baseball will move on to WGNS as well. But the other thing, too, for folks, if you're watching this podcast, you're probably tech savvy enough to grab your phone and download the Blue Raider app if you have not done that already, because on these Saturdays right now where you've got men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball all going on, you can toggle between radio broadcasts of the games. So there's all of that. And, of course, my real estate business, which has been very good and ready as we wind down basketball season. It is going to be that time of year where people may have moves coming up, whether they are coming here or moving somewhere else, or your family's gotten bigger, need that bigger house. ChooseChip.net is my website, and you can always find me at Exit Realty, Bob Lamb and Associates here in Murfreesboro.
Absolutely. Chip, once again, thanks for taking the time to join us. And until, next time, I hope to see you again.
Well, I'm glad you survived sitting next to us in Bowling Green. So you probably got a little bit of an education that night, but I appreciate the time and having me on again.
Absolutely. Again, thank you to the listener for watching today's episode. If you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. Again, getting closer and closer to that 100 mark. It would mean the world to me if you took the time to do that. Follow us on all of our social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, of course, on YouTube as well. Next week, we will be talking with Trey Green of the men's basketball program. Joe Fisher will be joining us to talk a little Lady Raiders basketball. Again, more hoops as we wind down closer to Conference USA tournament in Huntsville. Once again, thanks for tuning into today's episode. And until next time, go Blue.